And so we have finally arrived to the Battle of Cannae. Yeah, it kind of rhymed. But, man, I love Hannibal Barca, guys. I'm sorry if you've been keeping up with my videos and I've repeated this like 3 times, like actually 100 times already, but again, Hannibal Barca is my favorite military commander. I place him above Napoleon, Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar. He's just my favorite, you know? And I just don't know. I just admire Hannibal Barca so much. And his, like, tactical brilliance is just on another level, man. We saw a lot of his past videos, from History March and from here, Historia Civilis. And it's just, the man's on another level. And the fact that he went around and, like, beat up the Romans, who were on the rise to becoming the most powerful nation on the earth, is just telling, And, yeah, this battle, man, this is probably one of the most famous battles of all time. Probably the most famous. I think it's still taught, right? I've heard it's, like, taught in, like, military schools. Like, this left a lasting impression on history. It's my personal favorite battle of all time. And it's got everything, man. Like, it's just the ultimate stroke of brilliance, the likes of which very few are able to have in a single day. I think it's really telling that like 60 to 80,000 Romans were killed in a single day. I mean, granted, big battles obviously happened back then, but with that much casualties in a single day, I think that also contributed to just, its lasting impact on, like, human history. And it's just brilliant. Like, just pure tactical genius on display. Hannibal Barca, this is his placement. He, I think, is worthy, more than worthy, to be among the greats of, like, Napoleon, Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar. I think Hannibal Barca easily takes a spot among those men. And it's just, this battle is like his magnum opus, right? His masterpiece, if you would. And I just love it. Overall, let's watch. I want to watch this battle.
The Battle of Cannae was the third and most decisive battle of the 3 major Italian engagements during the Second Punic War. This single event redefined Roman strategy for a generation, and has fascinated generals ever since. If you look at my 2 previous videos, which are about the Battle of the Trebia River and the Battle of Lake Trasimene, you'll notice that these were instances where Hannibal clearly outsmarted his opponents. The Romans noticed this too, but they wouldn't have called it smarts, they would have called it trickery.
Yeah, that's the thing. The Romans were much more straightforward. Like, we're gonna fight you head on, and we're just gonna overpower you. We're gonna beat you with our superior strength and prowess in battle. But I'm telling you, after Cannae, like, if you guys want to watch my History March Hannibal videos, feel free to. But, like, you notice a shift. The Romans, who were once so aggressive and forward in attacking their enemies, after Cannae aren't like that anymore. They no longer give battles. They're no longer eager to face Hannibal on the field. He puts, like, the fear of God in them. Like, he makes the Romans hesitant and almost afraid to fight him. This is the Romans, guys. We know the Romans. We've covered Roman history from its foundation to the Byzantines on this channel. The fact that this one man alone could put that much fear and put that much, like, pressure on the Romans of all people is insane. That he broke their, like, very forward, aggressive style and made them have to change. That's just amazing. I love watching military tactics. If you guys have been watching this channel, you notice I just love reacting to the exploits of great commanders. We've watched Alexander the Great, Napoleon, Julius Caesar. I just love studying military tactics and strategy, and just how these great generals and men commanded armies, led them, what they did to win wars. It's just interesting, you know? And the Battle of Cannae might just be like the crowning jewel of why it's so awesome. Like, this battle, I know I'm really going all in with the Hannibal fanboying, but it's just, I love Hannibal. Just, I'm a huge fan. I'm a very big admirer. Very big admirer.
They hated trickery. To the Romans, the ideal battle took place on a flat surface with no obstacles around, where two armies could just come straight at each other and go at it. They had reason to feel this way. They had some of the best heavy infantry in the known world. To them, it was all about the strength and grit of head-to-head fighting. After losing two entire armies in what the Romans would have considered an unfair fight, they were determined to force a battle on their terms. In order to make this battle truly decisive, each consul was given 2 standard-sized armies. These 4 combined armies totaled an unprecedented 86,000 men. Just like we've seen before, they were mostly heavy infantry, with only 6,400 cavalry. As the Romans marched south to meet Hannibal, they deliberately kept to flat, open land. They knew that they had the numerical advantage, and didn't want to get sucked into another one of Hannibal's tricks. Hannibal's casualties from the previous battle had replaced themselves yet again, with new Gallic allies coming over to his side after his victory. Gauls now made up a third of his army. In total, he had 50,000 men, consisting of 40,000 infantry and 10,000 cavalry. Going into the battle, Rome's strategy was pretty straightforward. Remember how at the Trebia the Roman heavy infantry had unexpectedly broke through the Carthaginian center? And remember at Lake Trasimene how the Roman heavy infantry had managed to break through the Carthaginians blocking the road? Roman strategy leading up to this battle was fundamentally about repeating this success. Their plan was to break through the center of the Carthaginian line, and then overpower the two halves of the Carthaginian army with their superior numbers. To this end, Rome invested heavily in the center of their line. This had the added bonus of limiting their exposure to the elite Carthaginian cavalry who would be attacking on the wings. This plan isn't rocket science or anything, but you have to admit, based on past experience, it does make some sense. The only obvious alternative to this strategy would have been to have the Romans use their superior numbers to widen the line beyond the point where the Carthaginians could match them. Then they could have focused on the Carthaginian wings rather than on the center. This is a much more conventional strategy, but the only problem with it is that it leaves the infantry on the wings extremely exposed. So instead, they decided to attack up the center. Finally, they were thinking ahead, trying to mitigate the enemy cavalry. In order to fit even more men in the center of their line, the Romans formed up in large, narrow columns. Their cavalry was on the wings as usual, but their only job was to shield the infantry. The infantry on the wings' only job was to shield the infantry in the center. According to the plan, the center was where the battle would either be won or lost. The Carthaginian strategy going into the battle was eerily the opposite of the Roman one. Hannibal wanted to have a very thin center, with his elite African and Spanish infantry stacked deep on the wings. You'll see why in a minute. The Romans and the Carthaginians now formed up. The Romans left 10,000 of their 86,000 men to guard their camp, with the intent of launching a huge raid against the Carthaginian camp once the battle started. It seems to me to be a little overconfident to leave so many men behind, but their thinking was that the Carthaginians were pretty poorly supplied, which meant that a well-placed raid could potentially weaken them beyond their ability to fight. Again, it seems overconfident, but at least they're thinking ahead. So, the remaining 76,000 Romans deployed in the formation I described earlier, with a river on their right. The Carthaginians deployed opposite them. Immediately, the Carthaginian cavalry charged the Romans hard on the right flank. The Roman cavalry was significantly outnumbered and outclassed, and received absolutely no support from the nearby infantry. It was a mess. Apparently somebody mistakenly gave the order to dismount just as the cavalry were charging in, leaving everybody totally unprepared to fight. In a matter of minutes, the Roman cavalry on the right were killed or driven off. One of the consuls may have been killed in this initial clash. It was a terrible way to start the battle. It's worth noting here that the consuls were commanding from the cavalry on the wings, and not from a central location behind the infantry. For some reason, this really bothers me. It's no wonder that the Romans were slow to adapt at the Trebia, and at Trasimene, and here at Cannae. Their consuls were more interested in playing soldier than commanding an army. My boy Caesar never would have pulled stuff like this. His HQ was always right behind the thick of the fighting, with messengers coming and going at all times. Even
that might have been the nicest thing Historia Civilis has ever said about Julius Caesar. As someone who is famously anti-Caesar, that might just be the nicest thing I've ever heard him say. Wow. But yeah, it kind of goes to show you, right? Like, just Hannibal, I think, was in the center rallying on the men. Like, you know, there's no time to play soldier. You gotta be the commander. So, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Hannibal here at Cannae put himself right behind his center, where his line was thinnest, so that he could quickly move men around if he needed to. According to their own plan, the Roman heavy infantry in the center were key to winning this battle. At least one consul should have been with them. It's idiocy, if you ask me. Anyway, the Roman horse on the right were in disarray. Then, the Carthaginian infantry advanced. For some reason, they formed a convex shape with their line as they advanced. This could have been a mistake, but it also could have been a way to exaggerate the weakness of their center. In other words, they could have been offering up an enticing target. While this was happening, the cavalry on the Roman left were playing cat and mouse with the Carthaginian cavalry. The Carthaginians kept on charging and retreating and charging and retreating, and neither side really wanted to fight. As the infantry from both armies finally met, the Romans set to work. Their heavy infantry in the center hit hard and began to push the enemy back. However, the Romans didn't know this, but Hannibal had ordered his center to deliberately give ground as needed. The Romans thought they were making progress, when actually they were walking right into a trap.
Dude, Hannibal was playing like 3D chess with everyone, 5D chess. He was like orchestrating things, and these guys just thought, oh man, we're winning, we're about to destroy Hannibal. And then Hannibal's like, yeah, Uno reverse card, bro. I'm gonna use your strength to trap you. Like, just brilliant. Brilliant! You know? Just perfect.
At this point, the Carthaginians near the river had finally finished with the last of their opponents. They turned and charged all the way across the field to help their buddies on the other side. The Romans on this side were now outnumbered 3 or 4 to 1, and made a hasty retreat. By the way, and I hate to harp on this, with them went the other consul. We now have one consul dead and the other consul driven from the field. It kinda just makes me crazy. Meanwhile, the Roman
Yeah, essentially the army is now leaderless, right? That's insane.
infantry continued to advance right into the Carthaginian line. The center continued to slowly fall back as the wings held strong. Once the entire Roman line was fully committed, the Carthaginian infantry on the wings suddenly pivoted and charged inward. Simultaneously, the Carthaginian cavalry, free from any opposition, charged the Roman rear. Do you see this? It's a disaster.
Dude, this is like a military general's like fantasy right here, right? Completely trapping a larger and superior force. And man, does it go hard. Like, this is just beautiful, man. Like, the fact that Hannibal pulled this off is insane. And you know, it's like, they were essentially squeezed in to the point, like, yeah, men couldn't even, like, raise their hands to defend themselves, so people in the center were probably just waiting to be killed, which is horrifying to think about. Like, they're slowly squeezing in on you, you can't move, you're probably, like, claustrophobic, right? Like trying to breathe, trying to do something, just panicking, and you can't move until they get to you. It kind of reminds me of, like, the Game of Thrones Battle of the Bastards, where they're kind of, like, you know, squeezed in. Like, that's how terrifying it must have been for the Romans, man.
The Romans were now being squeezed from all directions and lost all cohesion. The army was now just a confused mess of humanity, pressed shoulder to shoulder with no room to fight. Now, the battle was more like a mass execution. Of the 86,000 Romans, only 3,400 would escape. The 10,000 men left behind at the Roman camp would be captured, and everybody else would be killed. The Carthaginians, on the other hand, lost only 8,000 total. If you're into kill-death ratios, that's 10 to 1.
Yeah. Hannibal so far hasn't even lost like 10,000 men. Only the Alps are actually what did him any big casualties, but he's lost continually. He hasn't even reached the total of 10,000, right? The largest army Rome ever fielded at that point could only take out 8,000 of Hannibal's dudes. That's just, this is like, you look at those numbers, you're like, oh my gosh. Like, that is a disaster of epic proportions, you know, for the Romans.
I cannot overstate how significant this loss was. It should have brought the state to its knees. There are estimates that Rome lost 20% of its adult male population on that day. To put that in some context, in World War I, Germany lost 6% of its adult male population over the course of 4 years. It's so awful it's hard to imagine how they dealt with the loss. Yet somehow, miraculously, they carried on. Even more miraculously, after 13 long, hard years, Rome would actually win the war. That makes...
Yeah, that's insane. Hannibal, I think if he had fought anyone else, would have won the war 10 times over. Like, anyone else would have sued for peace. But not Rome. Which kind of goes to show you that even the brilliance of one of the greatest tactical geniuses, military commanders of all time, even one of the greats couldn't take out Rome. Which just puts into perspective the Roman fighting spirit. Like, you can't make peace with Rome. The only time Rome will make peace with you is after they've destroyed you and you can't fight them anymore. But they never surrender, and that's just insane. Like, you know, and that's kind of the problem with Hannibal's strategic thinking. He thought he could bring them to, like, terms. No, Hannibal, the only way to stop Rome is to kill Rome. You have to, like, commit genocide. You have to take the city of Rome and then just keep going. You know, from then on, just complete massacre, cause you have to wipe Rome off the face of the map, because if you don't, they're not gonna go away. That's something that no one, I think, ever fully got about Rome, and that's why they made it far, you know?
Makes Cannae a testament to Hannibal's genius, but also a testament to Rome's cultural tenacity. There are very few states in world history that would have continued to demand unconditional surrender after such a loss. Cannae also speaks to the limits of military power. Even after so many victories, Carthage couldn't project enough power to occupy captured territory or to take the Roman capital. In that respect, so long as his state didn't back him up, there was a limit to what Hannibal could accomplish.
And as we know, the Carthaginians did not back him up. They even actively didn't give him the reinforcements and stuff he needed. The most they ever gave him was like, what, 4,000 cavalry and like 40 elephants? But that's it. Which is insane to me. In like the 15-year-long war, that's all they gave Hannibal, who could have won. I mean, granted, I don't know if he could have won, but like, either way, he could have gotten much farther, maybe even threatened Rome directly if he had more support. But I'm telling you, Carthage kind of wanted to lose. Their incompetence was on full display during the Second Punic War. So yeah. So I guess we're gonna finish at the Battle of Zama next time. I'll see you all then, everyone. Bye.